in the 50s, IndyCar pit crews, they consisted of 4 people, including the driver. And those are the guys that would, when the race car comes off the track, they change the tires real quick and they pump the gas and then they get the car back into the race. The pit crew consisted of 4 people, including the driver, so 3 people plus a driver. And it would take them to just change 2 of the tires and top off the gas. It would take them over a minute to do this. Fast forward to today, and I see some of you smiling, so you kind of know what's going on in the raceways today. Fast forward to today, the crews are allowed to be 11 members strong, plus the driver. And so, in order for them to they change all 4 tires, and top off the tank, and fix the wings, and wash the windshield, or whatever it is they do. The same job that took those guys over a minute, they now do in under 8 seconds. Yeah. That is amazing. But the Formula One guys, this is like the next level. They're allowed to have 20 people on their team. And when everybody's working together in sync with purpose and passion, they can get the job done in under 3 seconds. Yeah. People are just, I wish I could fill my tank in 8 seconds. They can fill it. I get impatient with just filling my gas. They do this in under 3 seconds. Bigger team, advancements in this field. My question for us is, who is your team? Who is your team? Who is helping you with the tasks that God has given you to do in this part of redemption history, where God is making his appeal to the world? Who is helping you? Because we all need help. As we just saw, Moses needed help. When the Amalekites, at the beginning of our text here, when the Amalekites attacked Israel, this is the first war God allowed, the first recorded war that God allowed Israel to fight in since leaving Egypt. They didn't fight against Egypt. They just walked through the waters. They didn't fight against the Philistines because God knew they would get scared and run back to Egypt. But here we see the Israelites having to fight. God assumed they were ready for this next part. And they quickly learned that the victory in the battle would be based upon their reliance on God. They would receive the victory through their dependence and reliance on God. How do I know this? Because it says Moses had the staff of God, and he would raise it up. And while the staff was in the air, the Israelites would win. They'd be winning. But Moses would get tired and put the staff down, and all of a sudden the Amalekites are winning. And so they got the message real quick, and so some guys came and helped Moses. They put a stone under him to sit on, and they each held up his arm, propped him up. And by the end of the day, can you imagine holding a staff all day till the night? By the end of the day, Israel had won. And they had learned their lesson then. Because the power of God was resting on this staff. This was the staff that parted the Red Seas. This was the staff that turned a rock into water and gave everybody, it split the rock and water came gushing out. This is the staff that Moses used to turn the Nile River into blood. This is the staff that turned into a serpent and ate the other serpents. This represented the power of God. And when they relied and looked up to God, they won. And so that tells us that we serve a God who fights our battles when we are looking to him, when we are depending upon him. He fights for us. Not that we don't have to do our part. Israel still had to fight. Israel had to leave Egypt to get to the Red Sea, to see God's hand at work. We have to do our part, but it's our dependence and our trust in God that will determine whether or not we see the victories that we want to see. And our reliance upon others. That's the other thing this passage teaches us. Moses couldn't hold that staff himself. So I want to quickly move on to the next section because I think the main idea is spelled out in this next section, in this conversation with Jethro, if you'll remember Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses. Let's go back in case anybody missed that section. Jethro, Moses, let's go way back. Moses killed an Egyptian at 40 years old. Moses was born Hebrew. He was an Israelite, raised in Pharaoh's household, raised in the ruler of Egypt's household because he was rescued. You'll remember, Pharaoh was having all the Israelite male babies killed. But Pharaoh's daughter took Moses in and raised him in Pharaoh's house, right under Pharaoh's watch. And so Moses escaped the baby Holocaust, but at 40, his conscience, his conviction got him, and he went out and he saw an Egyptian beating one of his his people of his heritage, the Israelites, and Moses killed the Egyptian guy who was beating on the Israelite. He knew Pharaoh was going to be unhappy, so he fled. Pharaoh was going to kill him. Moses fled to a place called Midian. He ran into these ladies. Their father took him in. Their father's name was Jethro. He took Moses in and gave Moses one of his daughters as a wife, Zipporah. For the next second 40 years of Moses' life, he lived with Jethro. He lived on the ranch. He lived there working alongside Jethro and his workers and his family, and probably ate dinner together every night and breakfast on the way out the door. Him and Jethro, they were tight. They had to be. They knew each other very well. And so, and then you'll remember, Moses has an encounter with God at the burning bush. He's 80 years old when he has this burning bush encounter. God tells Moses, you need to go to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. I'm going to deliver the Israelites. Their cries have come up to me, I've heard. And so Moses puts his wife and his 2 kids saddles them up on a donkey. Maybe there was more kids, but 2 are mentioned. And they start heading to Egypt. Somewhere along the line, Zipporah and Moses, we see a little friction, I think. She gets upset over this circumcision thing. And it appears she's not happy with him. For whatever reason, Moses, after having saddled his family up and heading to Egypt, tells his family, y'all go back. Go back to Jethro's. Go back to there. I'm going to do this mission. Could be because of friction. Maybe. Who knows? All I know is that's how it happened. They go back. Moses continues to Egypt. He does what God tells him. He confronts Pharaoh. The same Pharaoh he was, well, not the same Pharaoh, but, a Pharaoh who he was running for before. He meets God. Now he's running to Pharaoh saying, hey, I got a message. You need to let my people go, or let God's people go. He does it. Then God does the 10 plagues and delivers Israel through the Red Sea. Now, here comes Jethro with Moses' wife and kids. And Jethro comes. Now, you'll also remember, I've been saying this, that God's purpose in doing all this was not only to rescue the Israelites, but it was to make his name known among the nations. He was going to let Egypt know who he was. And by letting Egypt know, would be letting everybody else around know. God's desire is for people to know him. And so he has to make himself known in order for people, because we fail to teach the next generation often. And so God has to step in and say, hey, look, here's who I am. Here I am. Worship me. I'm the true God. I'm the living God. I can save you. And so in chapter 7, God tells them, look, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I stretch out my hand against Egypt. Jethro coming to Moses is evidence that God's plan worked. It's major. Think about this. So Jethro comes. He says, hey, look, I'm here. I've got your family. I've heard of what's going on. He was somewhere near Egypt, in Midian. He was somewhere close enough for Moses, when he was on the run, to get to him and then begin to live there. He was probably living along some major byway or highway where the news comes through. And Jethro comes and says, I've heard all that God has done in defeating the Egyptians. God's plan worked. So Moses comes out to meet Jethro, falls on him. They have bows down to him in respect. This great leader, Moses, bows down to his father-in-law, says, come on in. I'm going to tell you really what happened. You're going to have your mind blown. And Moses tells him the whole deal. And then Jethro says, now I know that God is above all other gods. That is huge. So Jethro was a priest. A priest of what? I don't know. Maybe he knew God. But now he knew who God was because of God's revealing himself. See, God initiates. But here's the thing. If Israel didn't obey, if they didn't leave, this plan wouldn't have worked. But it worked because Israel obeyed and left and got to the Red Sea, where God opened up the waters and then defeated all of Egypt at once, so that everybody heard that Yahweh, this God of the Israelites, is all-powerful. And as a result, people would come to know the living God. Now, we've named this series Exodus, Blueprint of the Gospel. What did Paul say in Romans? For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then can they call on him they have not believed in? And how can they believe without hearing about him? We have the same position, we have the same role as Israel. In our obedience, in our stepping out in faith, in our following God, God is making his appeal to Egypt, to this world, to all those around. In fact, 2 Corinthians 5:20, a verse we should all have locked in, talks about how we are ambassadors for Christ. And it says, therefore we are ambassadors for Christ. Since God is making his appeal through us, we plead on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. So as we are being Christians, witnessing to Christ, others are getting to hear. God is making his appeal through us. It's the same. Nothing's changed. God's plan is the same. He's making the appeal, and it's coming through his people walking in obedience. You see, Jethro had 40 years of being with Moses. 40 years of doing life with Moses. And then Moses comes and says, hey, I got to go back to Egypt. And Jethro's like, okay. And then the Moses that Jethro knew, he starts catching these tales. People saying, did you hear about this guy Moses? You hear what your son-in-law is doing? He just stepped up to Pharaoh. He just led the Israelites out of Egypt after being enslaved for 80 years by the most powerful government in the world. And he's like, Moses? My Moses? And then Jethro says, all right, I'm going to see Moses. Moses, I'm hearing all this stuff. What's going on here? I got your family with. What's going on? Is it true? Yeah, it's true. You see, the people we have the most impact on are the people closest to us. The people, our loved ones, our family, our friends, our coworkers if we work with them long enough. Because they're the ones that get to see in to what Christ has done in us. And through us, God is making his appeal to them. Now, the thing is they're also the people that make it the most discouraging for us. It's the hardest. But we got to be patient. We've got to endure. It took 40 years before Jethro came to know the living God in the way he did. God's plan is working itself out. So my encouragement is take heart. Your loved ones, God is making an appeal through you to them, and it is not too late for them. Some of you have been going 40 years, waiting, praying, witnessing. But that's why it's important that we are a good witness. That's why it's important that we walk closely with the Lord, because he is making his appeal through us. So, at the beginning, I asked, who is your team? Who is your Formula One team helping you in your walk with Christ? Who is alongside you? Because not only did Moses need people holding his hands up, when Jethro got there, he sees how Moses is leading, and he's judging the people, and all the people of Israel are coming to him with their problems and their disputes, and Moses from morning to evening is acting as this judge in every dispute. And Jethro sees it and goes, what are you doing, Moses? Like, that's not good. And Moses is like, really? Oh, I'm the intermediary. I'm the one that, God's talking to. And he goes, no, listen. You need to delegate, Moses. You need some help. And so for the second time in this passage, we see Moses needing help. If Moses needs help, we need help. That guy was something. He was something. If he needs help, we need help. We need Formula One help. We need everybody helping us. And so we got to humble ourselves, some of us. Some of us just got to humble ourselves. Because here's the thing. The mission that God has us on is really big. We're in the church age. This is a big deal. This is a big thing. He's making his appeal through the church. We are the church, and he is predominantly using us to make his appeal. So, your mission will get eaten up by the opposition if you're trying to do it alone. We live in America. It's an individualistic society where the Lone Ranger is celebrated. Everybody wants to be a Lone Ranger. A lone wolf. I don't follow the pack. I'm not some dumb sheep. Right? That's who's celebrated. But the Bible says we're sheep. And you know what a lone sheep is? Dinner. Dinner for some predators. We can't do it alone. We need help. We need a team. I've been a general contractor, construction. I don't need anybody. I can do it. If I can do it better than they'll do it, and I'm going to have to pay them to do it, and they're going to do a worse job. And But I had to humble myself, and that general contracting season learned me. And it was like, wow, wait a minute. I can subcontract out the flooring so that I'm not like broken by the end of this job. My back is not super strong. I can subcontract out somebody to do this or that I don't, and then once that happened, once I figured that out, and the money I was losing was really worth it because I could live to fight another day. I could live to work another job. So this whole thing is delegation runs the nation. This whole thing is efficiency. But we each need it because we each have a part to play. We each have a mission field. And then this. The church needs it. We need to be a Formula One racing team. We need everybody on deck, changing tires, filling the gas. The pastor can't be the guy that we think, oh, pastor should do it. Because that is not going to get us down the raceway very far, especially not this pastor. We're going to get about a quarter turn, and we're going to run out of gas. We need everybody